have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A new world order.
Child sex trafficking.
The deep state is trying to destroy Donald Trump's presidency.
Loose the battle plans of heaven.
It's all about control.
Broadcasting live to the world now. It's the Weekend Vigilante, Sheila Zilinsky.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sheila Zilinsky Show for this May 24th, 2017 edition. I do want to know what you folks just thought of that intro. It's a new intro. I've been having a love-hate relationship with all my intros. My new sort of slow one. Quite a few people commented on YouTube that is the lamest intro. They said that is worse than anything that you've ever done in the past. So it was definitely time to do a new intro. So let me know what you think. Don't forget, go to weekendvigilante.com, go to the contact and shoot me an email. All my contact information is there. That's weekendvigilante.com. While you're over there on the website, do make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I haven't promoted it very much in the last few years. After my original one was taken down in 2012, I didn't really promote it after that, but it is time to really build those numbers. I mean, come on. The world has millions of subscribers, and God's people need to get in those ranks as well. So do make sure that you share my YouTube channel, share shows, pass them on, email them to your friends, post them on social media. Please do your part in sharing the information. Hey, listen, something exciting. You have got to get your name entered into this grand prize giveaway that you want to get your name in on. It's the True Legends Conference Grand Prize Giveaway. I guess you could call it a getaway, too. It's an all-expense-paid trip to Branson, Missouri, the 15th through the 17th of September of this year. The Branson Theater, that's right. True Legends, the conference. Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, Ellie Marzulli, just a who's who of the greats, David Langford preaching. That right there is exciting. And I'll tell you, it's going to be amazing. Timothy Alberino, Derek Gilbert, Michael Lake. I mean, how great are these guys? I'm going to be there. There's another bonus. Hey, I'll sign your Power Prayer book or your Green Gospel book. And if you don't have those, go get them. Go to my website. After about 10 to 12 seconds, a banner automatically pops up. It says subscribe to my YouTube. You can't miss it. Click on there. You hit the subscribe. You're automatically entered into this draw. I don't want to take a bunch of time. There's lots more details. How can you find them? Like my Weekend Vigilante Facebook page right now. Stop what you're doing. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to my YouTube. Get in the loop, guys, because guess what? There's lots of exciting things coming, including very cool video, 5 to 10 minute little end time clips. There's lots of exciting things on the horizon, so it's a great idea to subscribe anyway. And again, you know what? There's no reason that liberal lefties should have millions of subscribers and God's people have a fraction of that. What's up with that? That just has me scratching my head. But anyway, on with the show. My good friend is here today to join me. The bus to Crazy Town has departed. We're in an all-out three-ring circus here, folks. And to weigh in on some of the breaking headlines, it is my good friend, Ted Broer. Dr. Ted, welcome to the Insane Asylum Lunacy three-ring circus. Ridiculous.
Well, I tell you what, you couldn't say anything any more true than that, Sheila. We've got some crazy stuff that's going on in the news this morning. We've got this Manchester bombing that pretty much is I consider it to be just something that they've staged in order to try to cover up, try to quiet down the Seth Rich murder. We got a lot of information to cover with you this morning. Plus, I also want to talk about GMOs, how they start poisoning our food supply with GMO products and how that was approved by the government. Wherever you want to start, we can start. And we also want to talk about The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, doing a skit on Saturday Night Live, being a mad scientist this past week who builds a robot that molests little children. I mean, this is some sick stuff that's going on, and we didn't even realize how bad it was. And until now, we're finding out that this thing is not getting any better with the globalists, even under Trump, Sheila.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ted. He is knee deep in the swamp. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Well, you said a mouthful there, and it's hard to know, like I said, where the head starts and the tail ends on this thing. But do you find this interesting? Of course, we're going to talk a lot more about Manchester, but you know, and I put I don't know if people know this, but today I put a meme that I created, and it's got a picture of George Soros on the phone, and it says, "This Seth Rich thing has become a problem," and there's Hillary's on the phone, and she's like, "Yeah, let's go to our Manchester plan." I mean, every time we turn around, there's some kind of false flag that brings in this draconian police state. You know, it's always an erosion of our civil liberties, our freedoms. Oh, you know, we want to be protected, right? We got to keep you safe. So that's interesting. But this is a part that I find so interesting. Does this headline seem odd to anyone else besides Ted and me? Here's the caption: "Man 22 kills 22 on May 22. Right, Ted.
No, it's how they do things. It's like with 9/11. If there's a book you can read, it's called The Most Dangerous Book in the World. In fact, I need to do a whole show with you one night on that, Sheila. And it's talking about 9/11 as a ritual mass sacrifice. And it goes into all of the numbers that are being used on 9/11 and what it means, even the Twin Towers and all the other things, that the symbolism that's involved in this. The guys that are involved in doing all of this, they're the Sabbatean Kabbalists. We know this. They're also called numerology Kabbalists. And what they are, they're sorcerers, they're wizards, and everything's by the numbers. Everything's by the stars, everything's by the numbers. And they find great energy and power in keeping certain things at certain times with certain numbers. And you say, well, that sounds really weird. Hey, it sounds weird to me too. It's just that's how these guys think, because they're pretty much, in fact, I had a show years ago, and I had a guy who was on, who was a scientist, and I won't recommend him to be on your show, but he's brilliant. But finally, he starts talking to me about these different things, and finally I said to him, I said, "Are you a numerologist Kabbalist?" And he goes, "Well, matter of fact, I am." I said, "Are you a wizard?" And he goes, "Yes, I am. I'm a wizard." Now, you think, well, is he serious? Yes, he was very serious. He had like top secret clearance with the U.S. military.
Oh, yeah.
And what was crazy about all of this stuff, he was coming clean on what he was. He was one of the only people that I've actually ever interviewed that was actually in Antarctica. And they took him inside one of the underground domes. He said the ceiling height in there was almost a mile high. He said it was so high, the dome was, that it had phosphorescent algae. That's why they had brought him in. That was lighting up the entire dome like the sun. And he said it had its own rain patterns in there. In fact, it was so large of a cavern that it would rain on the inside of the dome like its own ecosystem. And the military government had brought him in there to look at this algae to find out how it had phosphoresced and how it had created all the light in this area. Now, this is that guy. So he was with top secret clearance, but he's a numerologist, Kabbalist, a wizard. And so that's kind of crazy when you think about that, but that's the elite, and that's what they do. So yes, all of these numbers is how they do everything, Sheila. Everything's by the numbers, because that's where they get their greatest power in the unseen realms. This is including the human sacrifice day, with the May Day, all of these different things that they do, including with Halloween. It's always about certain specific dates and astrological signs, and that's who these guys are. They're a bunch of Satanists. They're a bunch of wizards. They're a bunch of warlocks. I mean, they really are those guys. And you think, well, I don't believe in that. It doesn't make any difference whether I believe in it or you believe in it or anybody believes in it. These guys believe in it. I remember years ago I was watching this show, and it was on the Spear of Destiny. And it was kind of interesting because it was a show that was on the History Channel. Brad Metzler decoded. You may remember it.
I do.
And what was interesting, they were talking about the Spear of Destiny and how Hitler had stolen the Spear of Destiny from the Austrian Museum, but somebody had stolen it from Hitler. And they were talking to one of the bodyguards of one of the world's elite in a church. And he said basically that he was working for the guy who had stolen the Spear of Destiny from Hitler. And they call themselves the Benigni Nephilim, the sons of the fallen. They believe they're the progeny of Lucifer himself. And they have these bloodlines that have gone through the eons of time, in which they still take they're very careful in who they marry to maintain the bloodline situation, of which having Luciferian blood in them. And he said that these guys want to take the Spear of Destiny and pierce their own guy in the Holy of Holies after they rebuild the temple and reset up a satanic empire on the planet. This is all on the Spear of Destiny with Brad Metzler. You can watch it on YouTube, for heaven's sakes. And let's just like the last 10 minutes of the show if you just want to watch that portion of it. And what's the crazy thing about it is he said, it doesn't matter whether you or I believe this. It says these guys believe this, and they're willing to die for this. And these are the guys, the Sabbatean Kabbalists, the ones who run the money system with the Rothschild banking cartel, that are pretty much determining the course of world events. And that's who these guys are. So yes, Sheila, you're absolutely right. Very good observation. The 22nd of May, all of the things they do, all of the stuff they constantly do, is all about the numbers. And again, it was a great, huge false flag, as far as I'm concerned, to cover up the Seth Rich murder probe. And the sad part about all of this stuff is that, the vast majority of the population of our country, they have absolutely no idea that this is going on behind the scenes. And when they see something like Ariana, whatever her name is, basically, when they see something like this happen, they think, oh my gosh, they don't even realize that it's, again, like the Monica Lewinsky missiles with Bill Clinton. Every time Bill Clinton would get his hand caught in a cookie jar with Monica Lewinsky, he'd send another missile somewhere to go ahead and change the news narrative, because it's so important for these guys to control the narrative of the news. And if they can do that, what it allows them to do is basically to maintain this illusion, this energy field around the planet, which is what these guys are involved in. It's like the Bible calls it this. It says there's a veil that's been placed around the eyes and the minds of the unbeliever so they cannot see the truth. Well, this veil is this energy system that they've got around the planet. Now, people are always asking me, they're saying, well, do you think that the world will end in a nuclear holocaust? And my response is always this: absolutely not. It took them thousands and thousands of years to build a huge energy grid around the planet back, the days of Noah. And they did it through the pyramids. They did it through the high places. They did it through the places of worship. They did it through all of the human sacrifice. And what people don't realize is that these pyramids and these things actually were energy resonant systems that worked with the ley lines, the magnetic ley lines of the planet, to create this energy field around the planet, this veil, so to speak. And what happened is when God flooded the planet and he pulled the planets apart, all of these energy systems, like with the great pyramids, they discontinued functioning. They no longer worked in unison. There's thousands of pyramids all over the planet. They were all built for that same purpose, to control the energy grid around the planet. Now they've done it again. They've done it with the HAARP. They've done it with their satellites. They've done it with their ocean-based radar domes. All of these things they've done. They have this huge energy field around us again. They've sprayed us with chemtrails down to the point that the stratosphere has become a sea of energized plasma, which is completely destroying weather patterns all over the planet. And what they're doing now is they're using that energy field to manipulate and control the minds of human beings. And there's no way they're going to come in with nuclear weapons and personally or intentionally or themselves destroy the planet and destroy this grid that's taken them thousands and thousands of years again to reestablish. They're not going to do that. God destroyed it the last time. And see, the Bible says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be upon Jesus' return. And that's exactly what we have to understand. They want to control the hearts and the minds. This new video, Bon Appetit, that Katy Perry just did, is one of the most filthy, profane, sick things I've ever watched in my entire life. And sadly, it's all about controlling the narrative and controlling the emotions of the young. They started doing it with all these allergies we've got with all of these kids. All of this stuff is all pre-planned to make us weak and disabled and create a victim status within all of us. Because if a person has a problem with their health, obviously they can't get involved in the Patriot movement, because don't you know, they don't feel good, and so they've got a problem. They've got to be on their Obamacare drugs, etc. So it's a mess, Sheila.
You'll find this interesting, Ted, that JFK was actually shot on the 22nd day. If you go through history, I mean, obviously we know the numbers 11, 22, 33. They're the three master numbers. Obviously, the Kabbalistic practitioners, you mentioned wizards and warlocks. Listen, Ted, the LA Times, this is shocking, folks. They admit that it's a fact. This is now Los Angeles Times saying straight out that witches are casting spells on Trump. There's an article just up yesterday. Their own reporter, Ted, has joined in on the action. Witchcraft it's trendy. Incantations are the in thing. Hexes, vexes, hoodoo, voodoo, Katy Perry, Bon disgusting is what that is. That's the new in vogue au courant. I've got a news flash for these demon-possessed devils here, Ted, these sorceresses. The living God has something to say about it in Exodus 22:18. Instant death, you shall not allow a witch to live. There you go, Ted.
Well, no, the Old Testament was very clear about it. God called these people to death, all these sorcerers and all these people who did all the things that they do, and all these people who were the mediums. God said they're to be taken out back and stoned to death. I mean, he wasn't very kind to these people. It's not that this stuff doesn't work, that this extra knowledge doesn't work, but it's all brought to you in Technicolor by Lucifer himself, and that's why God has banned it. So don't do it. And it wasn't because he was trying to be mean to us. He was trying to protect us, and he didn't want that seed of that teaching being brought into these people, in the children of Israel. I mean, the children of Israel had their own. They were already dealing with what was taught from the fallen angels all the way back to the Tower of Babel. and all the stuff that was brought into Egypt and what they were taught there for 400 years under captivity. They were already having to deal with all of these demons and these things out of hell that they learned out of Egypt. This druidic worship that they were taught. And all of that stuff is still permeating, the synagogue of Satan. In fact, Jesus actually called them out, and so they were sons of the devil, of Lucifer himself. I mean, this is he wasn't speaking metaphorically, in my opinion. He was telling them that. Now, this is that Kabbalistic thing that goes through with the worship of angels, and this is the problem that we have. These guys, these Sabbatean Kabbalists, who have been basically completely and totally kicked out hundreds of years ago from true Judaism. They're the ones that are running the world's affairs, running the media, and running the banking systems, and because of that, we're having to deal with all the blowback that these guys have caused. And the sad part about it is nobody wants to talk about this except for me and you and Dave and the Hagmans and a few other people, because it's so weird. I mean, the whole stuff is just weird, and nobody wants to really discuss it. In fact, I talked about how they get energy from sacrificing children on Hagman's show last Friday night. Yesterday or Monday, I was going to cover part of that again, and I said I don't want to cover that on my show because I told the guys, my listeners, I said I find this stuff so morally reprehensible and undefensible and so awful that I don't even like talking about it. So if you want to hear me go into detail about that stuff, listen to Doug's show on Friday night, and I'll explain it to you in graphic detail. But the crazy thing about this is that the vast majority of the population, including alternative show hosts, they don't realize how incredibly toxic this stuff is, to the general population, and how they continue to believe the lies and not believe the truth of what the Word of God says. And so it's something that's interesting.
Lee touched on so many points. One of the troubling things about this whole deep state versus the republic, I mean, your life depends on who wins right now, really, because the battleground is child sex trafficking. Dave and I called it the deep state kryptonite. That really is the common thread of all of this stuff. And yet it's crickets chirping. You will not find a mainstream news. In fact, I challenge the listeners. If you're going to find a New York Times, a Washington Compost, you find anything, clown news, you tell me somebody that's covering child sex trafficking. In fact, Ben Swan was talking about pedogate, and then all of a sudden he went black. I haven't heard from Ben Swan since March of this year. His Twitter account shut down. Very strange. You've got this whole weird Kim.com thing going on. You've got the Seth Rich insider perspective. Doug Hagman did a really good piece on that whole thing. You got breaking WikiLeaks email, ties to the Podesta brothers, to the doctor who oversaw Seth Rich before he died. You got all this really crazy stuff. Sean Hannity, there's something really strange going on there at Fox News. He's getting bombasted for even talking about Kim.com. They still have zero evidence on the fact that Trump colluded with Russia. And Dave mentioned something I thought was really important is Putin himself has spoken out against the satanic cabal, the synagogue of Satan, and their connection to these child sex trafficking rings, the pedogates of the world. Could this just be one big campaign to keep Putin and Trump separate? Because God forbid you have these people all involved in it, actually get exposed by the two big dogs teaming up on this. Wouldn't that be something if Trump and Putin, the big dogs, teamed up to rid the world of this disgusting debauchery? I'm supposed to have Craig the Sawman Sawyer come on and talk about what the DevGru SEAL Team 6 is doing. He's a Navy SEAL, very elite Navy SEALs coming on my program to get into this. You've got so much going on with it. People that expose it, well, they conveniently trip down a set of stairs or shoot themselves in the back of the head 8 times. Not only very suspicious, but when people get close to these stories, well, the Kim.com Seth Rich connection is a good example of that. And then what do? Nothing to see here, folks. Look over here. We got a Manchester situation, right?
That's correct. And Seth Rich is the one who released the information, and he was murdered for it, as far as I'm concerned. And now they're trying to. Now this is getting too much traction, and now they, like you said, they do the Manchester bombing. But what's interesting about this is of course, the bombers who always get involved in this are always killed. So apparently, somebody wound this guy up and turned him loose, and so they killed 22 people. There's that 22 again, including a girl named Aid, in a terror attack on a packed Ariana Grande concert. Ball-bearing bomb detonated at a pop concert, killing 22 people, injuring 119 more. The bomber has been named as Salman al-Abidin, of course, Muslim. Police carried out a controlled explosion at his home during raids around the city by armed officers, which we don't know what they did there. They could have destroyed evidence in his home. That's what's interesting about that. A teenage fan and an 8-year-old primary girl were among the dead, as well as a 26-year-old man. Video footage showed thousands fleeing in tears from the venue, many covered in blood. Police confirmed the suicide bomber died at the venue after improvised an IED was detonated. And, it's sad to me about all of this stuff. Now, was this real? Did it really happen? I mean, were people really shot? Were people really maimed? I don't know, Sheila. It could be an entire false flag that never even happened, but kind of like the stuff that happened, with Sandy Hook. But I don't know. It almost seems like it's hard to fake something this large, this big, with this many people. But it could have been something that was actually planned this day for that date with this many people dead. Were 22 people really killed? Or are they just using that number? I don't know. It's gotten so bad, it's hard to believe anything the mainstream media spouts out. But all they're trying to do, again, is to find a way to cover the media so the Seth Rich story stops. And this is what they do. They control the narrative, and they do it through flicker rates. They do it through colors. They do it through certain words and keywords. I mean, this is the nuttiest stuff that you've ever got into when you start reading this and learning about how they control the minds and the subconscious mind of the people who watch their programming.
Well, you're right, because we've talked about that in other shows. Folks, this is a fact that they pump out alpha, theta, beta, gamma, delta. I mean, pick your alphabet soup group here, Ted. I mean, it really is amazing. Now we find out these WikiLeaks emails, it actually ties the Podesta brothers. Ooh, big surprise. The Podestas are in the mix of this, to the doctor who oversaw Seth Rich before he died. Now, interesting thing, I believe, Ted, in all of this, and Dave Hodges and I touched on this last week, was the fact that Seth Rich, Comey, Clinton, Podestas, you can go on and on to the deep state. What is the one thing they all have in common? What's the common thread here? Guess what, Ted? 3 words: child sex trafficking.
Well, no, it is, and that's the thing that it's crazy to me, because even Hagman's been in touch with his contacts in the New York Police Department, and he's trying to get somebody up there who knows the truth about Wienergate, about what was on the Wiener computer with Abedin. That they want somebody to tell the truth about what's going on with this child sex trafficking, which is being done primarily through the United Nations, through the CIA, through their 1,000 military bases they have around the country, around the world. They literally use these military bases like lily pads. And they hop people around, they hop sex trafficking around, they hop organs around, they hop money and cash around, they hop drugs around. It's just the child sex trafficking has gotten huge. And what folks don't understand is this: the reason that these children are being used in this child sex trafficking is the energy that is created during the torture of these children during these sacrifices. Now, this is some sick stuff. This is what I talked about on Hagman. For some reason, these interdimensional entities, these fallen demons, these fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, all of these things that go bump in the night that are in this interdimensional field that's around us, they crave and they thrive, and they actually consume the energy of these children. And that's why they want these prepubescent children, and that's what the abortion thing is all about with Planned Parenthood. This is what they all do. It's all about the satanic ritual. This is what was going on with Baal and with Moloch. The way I look at it, it's kind of like a radio frequency dial. If you look at your radio on the dash, you don't really see anything coming out of it, any sound, because you don't understand, how the radio waves are being transmitted into it unless you've studied it. Now, what's interesting about this, you can turn on 91.1 and you get a radio signal. You can turn on 90.1 and you get a radio signal. You can turn on 88.1 and you get a radio signal. This is on the FM dial. And what's funny about this is that, all of these different signals coexist and they all overlap interdimensionally, so to speak. And that's exactly what this world that we live in is about. We have an interdimensional overlap in which these entities are really close to our radio dial that we're tuned into in this particular frequency band that we live in, which is what we are in, which we're in an energy field. And they're so close to us that it allows them to extract energy from us to feed them. That's why the Bible says that Satan runs about as a roaring lion, seeking those whom he may devour. And this is what the point of all of these sacrifices are. The energy that is being put into this field feeds these interdimensional entities. And when doing so, it allows them and helps them to allow the people on this planet who are doing this controlled through Kabbalah to control the energy fields around the planet, to keep this veil over the planet, because they don't want us to realize that we're basically their energy source and I guess we're kind of like their deli. They kind of like pick up all the pieces of, and they feed on us. And that's what was so crazy about that last video that Katy Perry did, that Bon Appetit, which I have not recommended anybody watches it. And if you do watch it, make sure you put it on mute. Do not listen to the filth of the lyrics. But remember this, guys. This is literally what they do. We're a food source for them, and that's why the Bible called it out. Satan runs about as a roaring lion, seeking those whom he may devour. And I don't believe that's metaphorically speaking. I believe he does that in a very real sense from an energy standpoint. And in some of these satanic rituals, they do it in a real sense as far as drinking the blood, etc. And all of this stuff is being used to feed this group of entities in this next dimension. And that's why they have continued for all these eons of time, required the sacrificing of the innocents and the young innocents and these young virgins and these young prepubescent children. It's like nectar to these things, and they basically thrive on that type of energy, and that's why they constantly are abducting children, trafficking children. We have 1 million kids go missing in the United States every year. I've got all of my kids when they're young, but we have a 14-year-old still at home, and I'm always telling her, you don't walk on the street, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't go here, you don't go there. You avoid allowing yourself to be put into a situation where you have the opportunity, or the horrible aspect of being abducted. And see, this is the thing that folks don't want to talk about, is pedogate, Sheila. You nailed it dead on the head, and this is the thing that brought Hillary Clinton's entire campaign to a screeching halt when they reopened the entire investigation against her. And then the Podesta emails were released with Wienergate and all of the information about the soul cooking and drinking of human blood and human semen and all the things that they do was released a week before the election. Because if you remember, Steve Pieczenik came on national news on Wednesday and said they had released all of this information, that the CIA had it, the FBI had it, all these governmental agencies had it, and that they were not going to allow Hillary Clinton to win the election by hacking it through the Diebold voting machines. And then they turn around the next day, on Thursday, she cancels her firework exhibitions over the Hudson River. She stopped it. She said, I'm not going to do that, spend millions of dollars that I can't get back. And then all of a sudden we know that she was not allowed to win the election because that election had already been hacked for Hillary to win. We know that. So now we have Donald Trump in there, and Donald Trump is doing everything he can, in my opinion, to fight the deep state. And every time he does anything wrong, they're going to bring it up in Technicolor and say that he's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. Because remember, a few weeks ago, he was everybody's hero when he was dropping missiles into Syria. And now suddenly there's certain things he doesn't want to do anymore, and now they're talking impeachment again. The same guy who they were praising a month ago, they're trying to impeach again. So they're using a lot of pressure on him because Congress is being completely controlled because of pedophilia or because of drugs or because of prostitution or because of some other sick, perverted act they've been caught doing on camera in one of these hotels of full videotape facilities inside of these rooms. I mean, we know that. We saw that with Jeffrey Epstein and with what he was doing. And these guys are being controlled. I mean, I remember I had Robert David Steele on my show a few weeks ago. He said over 50% of Congress is basically being blackmailed through something, and they're given the opportunity, and they're told, either you do what we tell you to do, and we give you everything you want, or you don't, and we destroy you by releasing this information. That's what's going on right now in Congress. That includes the House and the Senate, by the way, in the United States. And that's why we've got a clean house. We've got to get these guys out of office. If we can even do it again. Because the truth of the matter is, these guys, because of the voting fraud that's so prevalent in the United States now and globally, it'd be very difficult to get any of these guys out of office simply because you can't get a legitimate election any longer unless we go back to hand ballots and get rid of all of these electronic voting machines. So we found ourselves in a very interesting place in the United States in that we have completely been compromised by the deep state, by the CIA, which was the OSS, was started back in the 40s and then turned into the CIA and then turned around and basically have funded themselves now and since the late 40s and early 50s through the sale of heroin, and first into the nightclubs, into the Jewish mafia in New York. And now, of course, they're doing it from a global standpoint, including bringing almost $1 trillion of heroin into the United States every single year, washing the money through these international banking cartels, including the Exchange Stability Fund, to cover their deep covert ops. That's what's going on. If you don't understand the Exchange Stability Fund, it makes it very difficult to understand how they can fund themselves. There's like a 6-part series on the Exchange Stability Fund on YouTube, and you can watch it. It's like 7 or 8 minutes apiece, and it goes into detail of how the Rothschild banking cartel took control of the Treasury of the United States in 1934 through the Exchange Stability Fund. So all of these things have to be looked at from a realistic standpoint, and you have to understand, hey, these guys really are that sick They really are doing all this, and they really are in control of the narrative of the news. And as long as they have the news narrative, which controls your brain function, especially with the TV sets, through flicker rates by inducing either a beta, you actually get into an alpha brainwave state, or even as deep as a theta brainwave state when you watch the flicker rates, which pretty much puts you into a type of hypnosis to make you believe the lie during these broadcasts. And of course, if that's not enough, they give us, 50,000 different channels on sports that we can watch. And of course, I'm being facetious, but there's dozens of them that you can watch any sports event from here to the future to the beginning of the time and backwards. I mean, so people get caught up in this, and it basically overwhelms them, and they continue to watch these things. So they see themselves as part of that team, part of that group, part of that tribe, so to speak. And so they don't think about what's really going on in the real world. So everything the bread and circus shows that they're giving us is to control the narrative, control the energy field around the planet. And if we see that and we understand that, we'll realize very, very quickly that we have to do what we need to do for Jesus Christ and be Christians. Because if we don't, what ends up happening is we fall into the trap, into the snare of the devil, and our own eyes will be blinded. I had a dear friend of mine who's a pastor of a megachurch. He has like 6 different campuses with 20,000 members. And a few weeks ago, he actually promoted Katy Perry from the pulpit. I was watching him this is real. He promoted Katy Perry from the pulpit. And he wasn't even done with his sermon. I was watching it live, and I was sending him texts and said, "Hey, dude, what are you doing? Are you nuts?
Wow.
This woman's a Satanist. She's given herself over to the dark side." I said, you can't even mention her name to your congregation, because it just ties them back into her narrative and back into her sorcery that she's involved in. Crazy stuff.
Think about this, Ted. War is big business. You have to create an enemy. You got to find new enemies abroad, or focus on fighting war at home against what? The American people. And that's exactly what we're dealing with right now, Ted. They're, waging wars abroad to the tune of trillions of dollars. They've done it in the past. They've bought military equipment and sold it to foreign enemies. We have that whole mess. Local police, look around people. They're being transformed into these draconian standing armies. Militarization of the weapons, the vehicles, the trainings, the MRAPs. I mean, the public have been acclimated, Ted, to the sights and sounds of martial law through what? Urban training exercises. We're taught to, oh, look, a Black Hawk helicopter's flying over my city. Nothing to see here, folks. So you've got all these training drills. The citizenry's taught to fear and distrust each other, Ted, and welcome the metal detectors and the pat downs and the molestation drills. I mean, go to an airport and tell me this isn't 1984, Ted.
Well, no, it is. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create what we call a technological sub-reality. It's based on the smart network controlled by technology. This is going to tie us into a D-Wave computer, which is going to tie us directly interdimensionally into Lucifer himself. I mean, that's the goal here. You say, well, that sounds nuts. Well, I agree with you. That sounds nuts to me, too. But Kurzweil himself has even said the human brain connection to the cloud should occur by 2030. They'll be doing implants repeatedly into the human brains to tie them into the cloud. What it's allow you to do is not to have to think anymore. The computer will think for you, and the D-Wave computer will basically control all human function. And always remember this: the cloud needs to be accessible throughout the entire planet, and they have to do that by increasing the atmosphere density of transmittable ions. And that's what the chemtrails are all about, the barium and the aluminum, because it makes it conduct more electricity and more energy in the stratosphere. At one time, that was part of the ionosphere with the aurora borealis, so they could conduct electricity so easily up there because it was so energetically charged. Well, they have to bring those charged particles down into the stratosphere, which is not how God designed it, but they're doing it artificially by spraying this barium and this aluminum into the atmosphere, which trickles on down. Now remember, this DARPA has basically driving this transhumanism agenda. They're bathing the entire Earth in Wi-Fi, because that way they can easily track the slaves that they've basically marked now with their smart dust as being tied into our central nervous systems through the barium and the aluminum, using our DNA as a step-up transmitter coil to transmit our emotions and our energy into this field. And this Wi-Fi, this is why they're putting the Wi-Fi in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're putting the spray in sub-Saharan Africa. It has nothing to do with the Africans down there that are basically wanting they don't have smartphones. They don't have electricity in a lot of those areas, but they want to have this entire planet covered with this electromagnetic field. This is what they did in Genesis chapter 6, Sheila, with the pyramids. Again, they're not going to destroy their own structure. This is how they developed it. They're repeating what they did in Genesis chapter 6. And this is exactly what our Lord told us they were going to do. He said, as it was in the times of Noah, so shall it be upon my return. They're doing this to control everything, and they use the media to obfuscate. You know, they want us to wear the smart Google glasses. They want us to wear the smart Google watches. They want to get them on the body and to get these transmitters on the body. Then they're going to want to get them in the body. And all of this stuff, the Satanism, the child abuse, the murder, is all tied together with this. And that's exactly what you said earlier. They're trying to obfuscate this. And we need to realize that we have a high concentration of pedophiles in the upper levels of society. This frequency band of visible light that we live in, again, we mentioned earlier, is like a radio station, but there's many other dimensions on that same dial, and they're close to us, and so it allows them to feed off of us. They feed off the human energy. It's like the movie The Matrix, where they're feeding off people, turning them into batteries. These demonic forces feed on the energy on an ongoing basis, and this is what they do to the children. And this negative energy they thrive on. They want prepubescent energy, this pedophile, Sabbatean elite. This is the process of demons and what they do. They literally kill these children, extracting all the energy they can during these rituals and their sacrifices. I mean, again, look at the Old Testament with Baal, with Moloch. The demons always ask to sacrifice the children. That's why the energy from these children, from these young virgins who were basically children, were being given even to the Aztecs and the Incas. And women are even held in captivity globally, all over the place, in these groups, in these cults. They're called breeders, and they have children just to be sacrificed. This is the sub-reality that's among us that nobody wants to talk about. You know, and Satanism is basically the intersection with these demons, where they bring these things together. It's an energetic gateway is created, and the demon can be manifest in our dimension. And then they do the same type of ceremony on the other side of the veil, on the other dimension. The Bible says, you know, the Bible talks about how these guys masquerade as angels of the light. In addition to that, we have to realize that Aleister Crowley, he used to talk about as above, so below. And they do the same thing, like looking in the reflection. That's why these guys are all about the mirrors and the things that they're involved with. And it's like this. When you walk into a room, sometimes you'll feel like a cold chill if something bad has happened in that room, or when a demon shows up. And the reason that happens is when these demons manifest themselves, requires tremendous amounts of energy. So you can feel the difference in the temperature. The ritual draws the energy, and it's taking the heat energy. That's why the room goes cold. And many leadership families, bloodlines, royal families, they take place in these sacrifices. We know that. Again, it's the benign Nephilim. They consider themselves to be the progeny of Lucifer themselves. These people have no empathy. They're satanic bloodlines in many cases. They love to create world wars because it feeds them with the energy. They have no emotional consequences. They have no compassion. They have no empathy. They don't feel badly for killing 1 million people in Iraq, or killing 500,000 people in the bombing of Dresden in one night before the end of World War II, which were all women and children, and then strafing them with P-51 Mustangs with 50 caliber machine gun bullets, and killing the ones that were still by the river there in Dresden. And this is the craziest thing about that. You know, Churchill, who's also a Satanist, he basically endorsed all of this, and he wanted to do a giant human mass sacrifice in Dresden, and that's why he did this. And these guys are basically running the world, and they are controlling all of these different things. And my friends say, well, these people would never do that. Nobody would ever live like that or act like that. Well, no, the truth is you would never do that. Sheila, you would never do that. I would never do that. These guys don't care. They could go out and they get a rush out of it. They get high off of this stuff when they drink the blood, and they get excited from it. I mean, remember, death has a specific frequency also, and they feed on it. The Bible tells us to think about love and life and honesty and truth. That doesn't feed these demons. They want all the negative emotions, and that's what they're involved in. That's why they're doing all of this stuff, because they're not going to want to increase global love. They're not going to want us to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. They're not going to want us to do that. They want us to be in constant war and constant conflict. That's why so many times on my show, we try not to cover these stories that they want us to cover, because I don't want to talk about the wars and all the things that are happening, because it feeds the energy, because it makes people get scared, and it causes them to start thinking that all of this stuff that they're trying to do to us is true, which from a physical standpoint, much of it is true, but the reason they're doing it is because they want to be fed, and that energy is what gives them sustenance, Sheila.
Absolutely. Well, and Ted, let's think about this, though. What happened in Manchester, you can't open the floodgates of terrorism and then seek to control it. You got to know this is all by design. Why does Europe choose to sacrifice its children to the Islamic Moloch? What are children worth to a hedonistic Europe? Look at the state of Europe. It's very, very reflective of 1930s Germany, these rampages and the abominations, isn't it?
Well, it's just part of the plan. It's what it is. My parents. My mom came from Germany in 1952. She actually was born in Germany in 1916, and actually basically survived the entire rise and fall of the Third Reich, including the Great Depression and all the other things. And she used to tell me stories that would make your toes curl. And I mean, some horrible stuff that happened over there that they didn't bother to tell us about, like the millions of German troops that were allowed to starve to death, by Eisenhower and by Truman after World War II. I mean, it's literally set out in camps to starve to death. And the craziest thing is all of this stuff are all massive rituals, all mass rituals events as far as Satanism. And the sad part about all of this is that Germany and all these other countries, they've been secularized, Sheila. They've taken God out of them as far as our God, Yahweh, and Yeshua. They've taken that away from them. They don't go to church over there anymore. The cathedrals, that were 80, 90 years ago that were filled are now empty. Even the Protestant churches in Germany from Martin Luther are empty. And the way they did that is they made church a state-sponsored event in which the people have to have, if they go to church on a regular basis and they have a membership at a church, they take like 10% out of their paycheck automatically as a tithe to distribute equally among the different churches. Well, the people got so fed up with that, they stopped going to church. And this is what they do in Europe. It's a state-sponsored, sanctioned event. And so what they've done, they've driven people from the churches. And so what's happened is the people in Europe are totally, completely blind because that veil that's been put around them, there's nothing to stop that veil. That veil has permeated their souls and their consciousness into the fact that they completely and totally believe the lie. I mean, it looks like Angela Merkel's going to be reelected. I mean, it's the craziest thing you've ever seen because the Sabbatean Kabbalists that control the media in Europe, everybody who stands against Angela Merkel, they basically say is a right-wing extremist, neo-Nazi. And so they're trying to make everybody scared that if they say anything against the Muslims, that they're a neo-Nazi. And they've used the programming from the TV sets now for the past 70 years, and radio for the past 70 years, and commercials for the past 70 years, to make the German people believe that all of this stuff that happened with World War II, even 2 or 3 generations later, is all their fault, to create this giant guilt trip on them so they don't try to stop what's going on. See, what people don't realize is that when Adolf Hitler was blinded or was temporarily blinded by mustard gas in World War I, he developed a deep hatred towards the communists and the Bolsheviks. He really, really, really hated these guys. In addition to that, he realized that the communist revolution and the Bolsheviks and the Sabbateans that were involved in that were the ones that were at the Treaty of Versailles, and that they capitulated and forced Germany into these massive war reparations of World War I. Now remember, these Sabbateans are the ones that owned the international banking cartels. These are the Rothschilds. And that's one of the reasons he hated these guys so much. In fact, he loathed the international banking community because of this. And then when they hyperinflated the currency in Germany in the early 20s, my mom said they were spending 40 billion marks or $40 billion for one loaf of bread. 40 billion for one loaf of bread. They would have to take wheelbarrows full of money to the bakery, and it was cheaper to burn the money for fuel in the furnaces than it was to buy firewood. This is the nuttiest thing that you've ever seen. It actually happened there in Germany, in the 20s. Well, then they came in, they restructured the economy in Germany. They started getting out of the Great Depression because of huge amounts of money that were being poured in from the Allies. And then in 1929, again, the Rothschild banking Sabbatean satanic group contracted the M1 money supply here in the United States, warning all of their top people like Rockefeller to get out of the markets before they did it. They didn't have enough spending money at that point. Because of that, they contracted all of the cash, causing a massive, massive worldwide depression, which planted the seeds of fascism in Germany with Adolf Hitler, who made his rise and made a meteoric comeback when all these people in Germany were out of work. And then in 1933, we know he was basically brought in, and then the Reichstag fire happened, which was another false flag, and then made him Fuhrer of Germany, and then he decided to go ahead and do the cleansing of the international banking community. And that, quite frankly, was excellent when he did that. When he decided to throw the Rothschild bank out and start printing currency in Germany debt-free, like we used to do before 1913, he was able to build Germany into this giant war machine within just a few short years because he was able to do it debt-free. Now, people don't understand that's what he did, but then what he did, he kind of went nuts because he got back under the satanic influence, which had affected him when he was earlier as a youth. Then he decided he wanted to go in, instead of retaking the land that was taken from Germany from the Versailles Treaty. He decided he's going to go in and invade all of Poland and give half of Poland to Russia. Now, we can go through all of this in detail if you'd like on another show as far as what happened after that. But what the truth of the matter is, he didn't do everything wrong, but then he went nuts and got under control of this mess. And we had two competing satanic factions in Europe for the control of Europe. And he was being influenced by one of them. And of course, Europe was being influenced by the Sabbateans. And so it's a crazy story when you stop and look at it from a reality standpoint. But sadly, we now know that Hitler never died in the bunker. We know that. The FBI has released those files, and he probably lived his life out, in Argentina for the rest of his life, which there are many accounts of him being there and, actually talking to people, and people knew who he was. So, this is what they do. They give people new identities. They move them around. They get them out of the place. I was talking to Dave Hodges just the other night with Ken LaHaye with Enron, years ago when they defrauded the consumers out of billions of dollars in California. And also he was sentenced to prison. He decided he was going to sing like a canary, and suddenly he was dead in his jail cell a few hours later. And Dave and I disagree on this. I said there's a possibility that they didn't even kill him, that they gave him another identity and put him in a non-extradition country and basically set him up because he had a dead man switch, and that he was going to turn state's evidence on all the stuff that he had done and all the other people involved in it. They think they killed him, but it seems strange to me. He gets sentenced, and 3 hours later they find him dead in his jail cell. 20 minutes later, or whatever it was, he's being cremated with no autopsy. Yeah. It's just over. You can't even make this stuff up, And so I personally, with stuff like that, that's what I think they're doing with Weiner. They had to get Weiner's trial over with very, very quickly because they didn't want him to have exposure to the press. They didn't want him singing like a canary. So I personally believe that either he's going to get a huge deal when he gets out and go to a non-extradition country, and he's going to do something in a minimum security prison, or they're going to basically give him a new identity and say he died in prison, or they're going to really kill him in prison to shut him up because they don't want him talking about this computer and what's going on with Weinergate and Podesta-gate and Pedophile-gate and all of the things that they're involved with, Sheila.
Well, the common link between Uma Abedin and sicko Weinergate, Anthony Weiner, who just pled guilty. And I think Uma Abedin is actually just divorcing him. That's front page news. Oh, big surprise. Cut him loose. She didn't trust Hillary Clinton, so she had all these files which got Seth Rich killed. What could possibly be so sensitive that it would get a DNC staffer gunned down atrociously like he was? It's not bad enough these perverts have all these pictures and these child sex trafficking bust all these pedo rings, but then you have CPS involved in the collusion of sex trafficking children, and no one bats an eye over that. How sick, disgusting, and perverted is that? Let's not forget that CPS is deep into this as well.
I've got a friend of mine who got involved with CPS a few years ago. So he was turned in basically from an ex-employee, and they just lied about him. And I remember my buddy basically, as soon as the CPS people showed up, he picked up the speed dial and called his attorney. And the CPS people fled the house and never to be heard of again, right? Except for they had to do some kind of closure meeting. The reason that CPS gets away with this stuff is they prey on the people that don't have the money or the knowledge or the understanding that they have rights and that they don't have to talk to these guys without their attorneys present. And so what ends up happening, Sheila, is these children are taken away in many cases from families that have no ability to defend themselves or to try to figure out how in the world they've gotten themselves into this situation, and they basically fall on the mercy of the court. And these children are transferred 2 or 3 different houses, and all of a sudden now they're gone, they get caught in the network, and now these parents aren't allowed to see them anymore, and they just disappear. And the sad part about this is they're never heard of again because they get child sex trafficked. And we know this is happening. We know this has been brought out multiple times, even in the mainstream press. And this is what's going on. They're getting abducted from their schoolyards. They're getting abducted from walking home from school. I mean, we're talking 1 million kids a year go missing in the United States, many of them never to be heard from again. And this is that CIA thing. Remember this for a second, just for 1 second. The heroin business in the United States is $1 trillion a year. Trillion. That's bigger than the automobile industry, Sheila. We don't sell $1 trillion worth of cars in the United States every year. And we see all of these car dealerships everywhere. Heroin is bigger than that. I mean, that's how big this has become. This illicit trafficking in children, in drugs, in organs, in child organs. I mean, look how Planned Parenthood was busted for selling human body parts for the highest bidder. Nothing's happened to these people that were doing that, but yet, and they're still receiving $500 million a year in funding from the federal government that we're being forced to pay through our tax dollars. It's because they don't want that part of society to be exposed to the other part of society that's living in a Pollyanna existence. In fact, it's kind of like the people that are unaware of the reality, they are doing everything they possibly can to prevent them from understanding what true reality is. And that's what this whole thing's about, Sheila. It's the obfuscation of the news. It's the obfuscation of the truth. All of it. And then when you get people out on Fox News that start talking or telling the truth about certain things, suddenly they get fired. And and Roger Ailes dies a few days ago. I mean, Good Lord. I mean, like that wasn't suspicious, right? I mean, the whole thing is just weird how this stuff happens. But yet again, the bulk of the population doesn't think anything about it because they're caught up in their sports. They're caught up trying to earn a living. They've got college loans they're still trying to pay because they're put into an indentured servitude. I mean, back in the 1700s, people would come from England and they would pay for their ship transfer to the United States by serving as a slave for up to 7 years. And that's what we've done to the population again through student loans. And this is what people are so caught up in. They're caught up. They've got one or two jobs just trying to pay the bills. They've got a marriage that they really don't know what to do with because it's bad because both people are having to work and they never see each other all the time. They got a bunch of brat kids that want to listen to Katy Perry and Madonna and all these sicko singers, and so they're all involved with all their perversion with Miley Cyrus. And so this is what's going on in the United States right now and in Canada. And so what ends up happening is we're in a situation where nobody wants to stop and look around them and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not okay. This is bad. We need to fix this, and we need to stop this. And again, it's because of the obfuscation of the press. They control the narrative. And, John Rappaport's done such a good job writing stories on how the mainstream media controls the press and they make you think what they want you to think, and most of the time what they want you to think has nothing to do with reality. And that's exactly like you started the show today, Sheila. Pedagate is one of those things that we need to be looking at in depth. And Donald Trump, until he decides that he's going to investigate what was on the Wiener computer and basically release that information and put the crooked Hillary and these weirdos into jail, nothing in Washington, D.C. is going to change, and it's going to be pedophiles central as normal. Last year, 2 years ago, I was up in D.C. with Coach Daubermeyer. We were speaking at a conference up there, and it was crazy. When we walked the halls of Congress, me and Coach Daubermeyer, I finally looked at him and I said, is it just me or is it my imagination, or do you see this, that almost every single person here is gay? And he said to me, he goes, nah, man, I'm seeing it too. He says, this is really weird. He says, like all the pages are gay. All the people working here are gay. I mean, we're talking like 60, 70, 80%. We were staying at the W Hotel. We stayed there for one night. I didn't realize that was a huge gay hotel. And like, no, I didn't realize that. And so we walk into a big giant gay hotel. And I thought, this is nuts. We stayed there for one night. I immediately left and I said, I'm done. This is just whacked out here in DC. And so we have no idea how this entire subculture of reality, bringing us into this technocratic new world order through technology and through chips and through brain implants, has taken control of the energy field around the planet to cause this mass hypnosis to get stronger and stronger and stronger. We watched a movie last night called Cowboys and Aliens. It's kind of a funny movie. It was done a few years ago. And these aliens had come to the planet and they were having this one light that these people were staring at was putting them into mass hypnosis, and they had no control over themselves because they were staring into the light. That reminds me so much of what happens with TV and what happens with the programming that takes place with the local channels, with the alpha brainwave states and the theta brainwave states, that the people literally become so hypnotized they have no idea what's going on around them, Sheila.
You know what it is, Ted? It's a techno-sorcery-induced spiritual coma. And for what? To get acclimated to demonic manifestation. Bingo.
Well, that's the Sabbatean way. Because once you accept demons as commonplace, when these things start manifesting in our reality, because of CERN and all the portals they're opening, we'll think they're okay. We'll think they're cool. We'll think they're okay. It's kind of like inviting, these guys, all these stories about vampires and all of these things, they have bases in sub-reality as far as things that happen with Vlad the Impaler over in Transylvania, who's basically related to the royal family, which they admit to. This was Count Dracula. And so, for instance, if Dracula knocks on your door, a vampire knocks on your door, says, may I come in? You say, you may not come in. You resist them. The Bible says, if you resist the devil, he will flee. If you resist them and tell them, no, you may not come in, they can't come in, they can't mess with you. That's that's what they're doing. They want us to accept what they're doing and to invite them in. They want us to stand in line for the chips to have the mark of the beast applied to our foreheads or our hands. They want us to say, please do this to me. I'm giving you permission. See, that's what they have to do from a karma standpoint in their sub-reality they live in, because it's so bad on the other side if they don't. So in other words, if they tell you they're going to do all these horrible things to you and you say okay or you don't resist, then as far as they're concerned, they don't have any kind of repercussion on the other side of this to have to get blowback from. They're okay with it. So that's why they constantly are programming us, wanting us to take the mark, wanting us to watch Katy Perry's videos. They want us to be willingly part of their sacrificial network. So when they come to us and they say, it's time to sacrifice your child to Lucifer, we go, oh, okay, let us do this willingly. Because remember, this is what happened a lot of times with the Aztecs and the Incas. They would bring their daughters and their children, and the Jews would do this too, also in the Old Testament. They would bring their children to Moloch or to Baal willingly. They would sacrifice these children to appease these demons. And this is what these demons want. They want willful sacrifices because, again, they know that we have freedom of will. So again, it's another counterfeit. They want us to come willingly to them and accept their teachings, accept the mark of the beast, and not kick against this. That's what they want. That's the goal of these guys, and that's how they're doing it, by continually bombarding us with the images, which are, by the way, burned into the right part of the brain, which can never be forgotten. I mean, newsflash, if you're listening to this right now and you think that I'm crazy and Sheila's crazy, look at the back of your dollar bill. Look at your money. It's the all-seeing eye. It goes right back to ISIS and to the Egyptian stuff that the children of Israel learned while they were in Egypt. It goes right back to sorcery. It goes right back to the Sabbatean Kabbalists and the Druidic worship. This is what they're doing to us. It's the symbology. So every time we spend their Babylonian magic money, we see this symbol, the symbology, because we may not see it consciously because our mind filters things out through what we call a reticulator activator in the back of the brain, but subconsciously we still see it over and over and over and over again, and it embeds this symbology into our brain that this is okay, so we eventually accept it. Well, guys, listen to me. We have to stand against all of this to the best of our ability with all the might that we can possibly muster. We've got to pray every single day. And when you pray, don't say, dear Lord, please don't kill me today. Don't say stuff like that, because the words that you speak become physical reality because they create scalar waves, especially your prayers, and they change the energy field that you live in. Say, God, protect me today. I station angels all about me. I plead the blood of Christ over me, Lord. I ask you to protect me and my family today. I pray this in the name of Jesus. And when you pray those types of prayers, Sheila, the things that you want, not what you don't want, what ends up happening, you create this incredible wall of protection around you, because in the unseen realm, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. And we have to understand that. And as long as we stand firm in the belief of who Jesus Christ is, and once we understand all of that stuff, they can't touch us because we're covered by the blood of the Lamb.
Amen. That's true. And that only applies to blood-bought Christians. So if you're not a Christian, you might want to look to Jesus, because I'll tell you what, that is the only antidote for all this cornucopia straight from Hell's Kitchen. Ted, it is always a pleasure to have you on the program. I just want to give out your website. It's healthmasters.com. That's healthmasters.com. Ted's the man. Go check out his handiwork. Ted, thank you so much for coming on the program, and do come back soon.
Thank you, Sheila. You got to get you back on my show, too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ted. Folks, we're out of time. But tomorrow on the program, Monty Mulkey. You do not want to miss that. And then it's always fun with my good friend, Mark Morano. He's coming on Friday. I'm going to get him to weigh in on his debate with Bill Nye that's got 2 million hits. Oh, Mark is just, he's hilarious. It'll be a great show. So be tuning in this Friday. And thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night and God bless.